In the modern design atmosphere we occupy today, it's easy to constantly look forward. What's the newest material? Which process can give me an edge? How can I use technology to my benefit? However, we cannot forget the generations of evolution that has brought us to this point. It's clear to see the threads of influence that surround us. Many of such threads are leading back to the modernist movement of the mid-century. Great leaps were made in technology and developmental techniques, and we can imagine great designers asking themselves the same questions we pose ourselves today. Treading into the design history of Australia, we find many formidable designers born in the post-war climate, such as Austrian-Australian architect Harry Seidler. Seidler carved a place in history for his designs. Heavily influenced by the modernist ideology, he aspired to create function-first spaces, machines for living, many of which still stand proudly today. Following Seidler's thread of influence, we can observe how greatly designers such as him have impacted our fundamental appreciation of design and architecture through the ages. With this understanding, it's clear to see how modern designers like Kirsten Thompson, an Australian architect born in 1965, have been influenced by this movement. Harry Seidler earned his place in history through his work in modernist architecture, a path spurred on by his background and education. Born in Vienna in 1923, his family sadly fled Austria in 1938 in the wake of Nazi Germany. Seidler studied building and construction at Cambridgeshire Technical School in England, but was, however, interned by the British authorities from May 1940 to October 1941. After being shipped from Liverpool to the Isle of Man and then to Quebec, Seidler graduated from the University of Manitoba in 1944 with honours, eventually becoming a registered architect in Ontario, Canada. Seidler, in spite of only being a small child when the Bear House closed, can be traced to have a foundation with the teachings of the school with celebrated teachers. He studied at the Harvard Graduate School of Design under Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer in the US on a scholarship, whilst also working with Alvar Aalto designing the Baker Dorm at MIT. He then studied visual aesthetics under Joseph Albers at the Black Mountain College. Seidler continued to work as the first assistant of Breuer in New York from 1946 to 1948. Seidler's first entrance into the design industry in Australia came from his parents, who had migrated to Sydney in 1946. They commissioned him to build their house, and initially Seidler had no intention of staying longer than the building time of the property. This property itself became the Rose Seidler House, an award-winning feat of engineering. The Rose House can be observed to display very American design, coming hot off the heels of Seidler's time studying and working throughout the US under Breuer. In fact, this context can be observed even from the gardens that Seidler incorporated into the design. He cleared a significant amount of ground, but added a few deliberate eucalyptus plants. The effect that this creates echoes the stark contrast between man-made and natural elements that is repeated in modernist design trends. The design features two levels, with the second overhanging on either side. The use of this physics-defying aspect was groundbreaking at the time, which attracted the attention of many a critic. Furthermore, the strong lines and sharp edges formed by the design highlight its modernist aspects. To quote Seidler himself, this house explodes the surfaces that enclose a normal house or space, and turns it into a continuum of freestanding planes, through which the eye can never see an end. You are always intrigued what's beyond. You can always see something floating into the distance. There is never an obstruction to your vision. It is a continuum of space that I believe 20th century man's eyes and senses respond positively to. The building was gifted to the Historic Houses Trust in 1988. The Trust used the building as a purest example of a house from its originating era, the architecture truly potent of modernist aspects. Another of Seidler's works that exemplify the modernist tactic of design includes the Harry and Penelope Seidler House, a building built for him and his family. His wife Penelope Seidler was also an architect. This building was a collaboration of the two. After the Rose Seidler House, Seidler melded significantly more with the Australian-centric designs of the time, developing his own styles and working with his surroundings. This house exhibits a development of Seidler as he became one of the very niche design community that was using reinforced concrete as a formal building material. The house stands tall even now, celebrating its 52nd year, whilst also being a living museum in Sydney for guests to indulge in a quintessentially modernist design.
But the house doesn't pretend to be natural. It's in stark contrast to nature itself, but everywhere you look, you're aware of the nature. There's no room in the house that doesn't get ample daylight. And the lighting in the house too is quite significant. It hasn't changed since we moved here. It's all built-in lights, and some of the actual globes haven't been changed since we moved in.
Needless to say, Seidler was a bright light of modernism, not only in Australia but worldwide, and his purist attitude towards the movement secured his designs in history. In the book analysing the relationships of designers to the rest of society, Cameron Milton notes that Seidler's purist attitude and willingness to stand up for the designs he believed in caused a growing notoriety amongst planning committees, as several municipalities had challenged his plans and he'd gone to court and won every one. Seidler is credited with becoming the first architect to fully express the principles of the Bauhaus in Australia. Analysing the effect of Seidler and the Modernist era could be difficult to approach, as the movement was widespread across the world. In order to magnify this effect, we can look at Modernist designers through a scope. Today, we'll be looking at Kirsten Thompson. Thompson, an architect and principal at KTA, or Kirsten Thompson Architects, has designed many buildings and houses around Australia, each stamped with her style. Thompson's works are noticeably highlighted by a modernist mindset, with common themes of solid geometric shapes, minimal colour palettes, truth to materials, and function-formed designs. Her design of the country villa represents this, the structure made of interlocking rectangles formed of exposed concrete and steel, the interior featuring exposed timber beams and walls. Even the holistic shape of the building pays homage to the Modernist era with an almost perfect square floor plan. Seidler served as a vanguard of the modernist ethos in Australia, his designs accruing acclaim as he took strides in supporting modernist design. Current designers like Kirsten Thompson pay homage to the modernist movement, exemplifying many of the critical attributes of the movement. The modernist era plays part in creating the design climate we enjoy today, its ideals still as prevalent today as they were to true modernist designers like Harry Seidler.